Hello and welcome to We Turned Out Okay. This is the show where we are always working to help you change your child's behavior from bad to good, feel happy inside, and truly enjoy family time. I am Karen Locke-Culp. I'm the creator of this show and WeTurnedOutOK.com, and I am very, very excited here today because here with me I have got Shannon Connery, PhD, who is, welcome Shannon, hello. I'll introduce you in a
Hi.
sec, but I just wanted to get you, to be able to wave and say hi. Shannon is a therapist. She's a podcaster. You can find her work at shannonconnery.com. She's the creator of a paradigm that I am finding super helpful in dealing with all the challenges of our current time in the pandemic in spring and summer of 2020. I'm excited to talk about all of this and lots more with today's guest. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to Shannon Connery. Yay!
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I think the first question that I've been trying to ask guests, especially in these last few months, is how are you doing? How are you and your family keeping?
I mean, that's such a good and complex question right now. I mean, at any other time, wouldn't it be like good, great, struggling? You know, I I'm doing okay this week. I wasn't doing very well a few weeks ago, and I think it's a weird time, right? Because we're in this pandemic, and nobody's been through it. That's alive and can speak to it. Other than a few people that I don't know have lived through a
Mhm.
pandemic, and so I liken it very much to uh, when we first started living part time in France. I had culture shock. So everything you do in a foreign country where you don't speak the language takes so much energy. It's exhausting. Like, where do I find a light bulb? I don't know how to say light bulb. I
Mhm.
don't know what the word for Home Depot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm finding it like that it's changing. This whole process is evolving, and it's challenging. It's challenging in a way I've never experienced before.
It's so interesting that you say that because I've had the same feeling that I would get in a power outage where some things work, like the water. We have, the water system in our house still, you can fill up a pot with water, but then you can't use the lights, you can't use the stove. And it's like, what's going to work? If where do
That's
I
a great
turn
analogy.
to,
Yeah.
because there are these gaps of things that are not the same, but then we're still in the same surroundings and that kind of thing. I've also heard it referred to, and this really resonated with me as it's not just the pandemic, right? We are living through something similar. Imagine like combining the Great Depression with the 1918 flu pandemic, with the civil rights movement, the civil rights
Well
era.
said. Well said. Yeah.
And I think that was James Arthur M of the Minority Corner podcast who first characterized it like that for me. I was like, wow, that is so true. It's a lot.
And add on to that, the most contentious, angry, politically divisive time I can remember. And I've read about maybe a few others, but very seldom have we been two countries living in one country at the level we are now.
I definitely think that is true for me. I think I was just talking with my dad this morning about white privilege and about bias, and he was saying that he heard one of the late night talk show hosts was interviewed by his producer, and the talk show host is a white man and the producer is a black woman. And my dad says he was watching the interview and feeling very similar to the way that the host was feeling. In other words, not feeling like he had any privilege, I guess. He was like, well, what is that? Like, I'm just this guy, right? And the black producer said to him, have you ever been stopped by the police? And the show host says, yep, I have. And the producer says, well, did you ever feel like your life was in danger when you were stopped by the police? And the producer was like, and the host was like, no, like not once. And so then the producer was able to say, well, that is one experience of privilege that you have. And so I feel exactly like you, Shannon, in the sense of it's feeling like we're very divided now, but I wonder if there are people who have always, in fact, I feel like there must be people who have always felt that, even though I haven't felt it. Do you see what I mean?
Of course, of course. I mean, once again, it's even if, as I've been listening to podcasts addressing this, how to be an ally, what does it mean to be an anti-racist? You know, what have we been doing wrong by just being content with not being a racist? And what does it really take to change the culture? I've been learning and learning so much. And I had this horrible, horrible realization which just filled me with shame, and then I quickly went like, well, that's not going to change the issue. But my podcast that I've been doing for 2 seasons is called Fix Yourself. And it came from a place that I had so many clients who were just living in anger and blame. And it always was about the other. Like, I'm so pissed at my husband. If he just would work less and play less golf and blah, 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 then I would be happy. Or if my mom would just leave me alone, or if this other person would behave differently, I could be happy. And as I went through some very difficult times myself a decade ago. And as I really analyzed that, because I lived in that space of blame, I thought it gives all your power away. And so I came up with this, like, we all need to be willing to say authentically, like, what we're struggling with, what we need to own, what we need to change, and then be working all the time to fix those. It was never about being broken. But even in this last month, I've been like, that's such a white privilege thing to even think. There are people in our culture who don't have the luxury of fixing themselves because they can't drive without getting pulled over, mm-hmm. and then being in fear of their safety.
Yeah.
And once again, so this has been such a time to really reflect on, okay, well, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
I live in a space, though, that if I'm part of this problem, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's so well said, that, like, I'm feeling the division now, but yeah, for some people it's been there forever.
And I'm so glad that I know about my own ignorance. I know that, and that sounds like maybe a weird thing to say, but I feel like that's the place to begin, where I can say, like, holy mackerel, I know nothing about what some people's experiences are. And now that I do know, so I have a friend named Shane, who is a white guy from Kentucky. He's a very successful entrepreneur. And he has a friend named Talit, who is a very successful entrepreneur, Black man from Chicago. And the two of them, just after George Floyd's murder, the two of them had an hour and 45-minute conversation called Let's Talk About Racial Justice. I will link to it in the show notes because I really this is like necessary viewing. Talit in particular was so generous with sharing of his experiences. I actually did a whole show on the things that he came up with, like 4 points that he was talking about, like, you operate within your own sphere of influence, but here's what you need to be able to say. And one of them was, be aware. Don't ask a Black person to relive their trauma so that you can understand it. I was like, holy mackerel. And then he basically did that for us. I mean, he gave us this incredible gift. It was so generous of, like, sharing his experiences. And among other things, I mean, he when he was like 11, he saw a cross on fire in the yard adjacent to his yard, like across the road from him. When he was a teenager, he had this experience of being on the ground face down with a bunch of police with weapons drawn on him. He hadn't done anything wrong. And that was all incredibly moving. And I just thought, holy mackerel, right? And then he and Shane he asked Shane, like, what are you teaching your kids about racism and stuff like that? And Shane says, well, we're teaching them that, it's what's in your heart that matters. And that, like, we support everyone regardless of how they look. We have great friends who are of every color, shape, size, belief, everything. And then Shane says, Talit, what are you teaching your kids? And Talit is teaching his kids, you will be discriminated against. And it's like, oh, it's such a completely different experience.
I know. And I'm really lucky that one of our favorite couples, and a couple that we're very close to, the man is Black. And so I have had the luxury of having a background very close. We travel together. He's an incredibly close friend and somebody that it's easy for me. So during this whole process, I've been able to say, what do you want? I know you don't represent all Black people, but how can I be of help? And I've even been able to say, like, can I wear this t-shirt? There's another t-shirt that says, that I love so much. So I'm wearing, for people who are just listening, I have on my t-shirt that says, in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. But when I was looking at t-shirts online for my daughter and I to visually support this cause, I saw one that I loved. It said, love Black people like you love Black culture. Because we revere athletes and music, and, Beyonce is everyone's like perfect woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that was so great. But I had to ask my friend, is that okay? Like, how would you feel if you saw me wearing that t-shirt? He said, great, do it. Like, I'm show up, just show up right now.
Yeah.
And
Love it.
But I agree with you. I agree with your statement. It's humbling, but I think it's a really good thing to say right now. Like, I'm in my infancy of this topic.
Yeah.
Whereas if you'd asked me before, the George Floyd incident, I would have said I was pretty far on the, woke scale.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I have been feeling like the first thing I did was I went and dug out my, they were on a bookshelf, but I haven't looked at these in a couple years, but I have a couple of fabulous books from my very first experiences learning about early childhood education. One of them is called Anti-Bias Curriculum, and the other one is called Developmentally Appropriate Practice. And they're both put out by this organization called the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC. It's the standard by which a preschool ought to be judged, in my opinion. And I've gone through that process of being, going through the process of getting accredited by the NAEYC. It's awesome. And it's awesomely difficult. Like, it's the scope of it is incredible. And I happened to open it up to a page, to open the anti-bias curriculum up to a page about a child noticing another child who doesn't look like them. And basically the child saying, like, well, why do they have that curly hair or something like that? And the teacher basically saying, well, we all look different. Like, everybody looks different. Some people have this and some people have that, and it's really neat. And then they get into, in this book, they're sort of breaking down, like, how do we help that child feel safe? Like, one of the first things we can do is we can make sure that their physical safety is protected. No one should be sort of reaching out to, like, touch them or grab them or something like that just because they look different. We want to make sure that we're supporting everyone and respecting their boundaries. And it's all wrapped up in really wonderful developmental practice. And in the raising of young children, the kinds of things we want everyone to be able to expect. You should be able to expect that no one's going to touch you in a way that feels wrong for you, right? No matter who you are. And so, as you say, Shannon, I had thought I was pretty far along the timeline of, like, knowledge, and I knew nothing, and
Right.
I'm working really hard to keep that and hold on to it and keep trying to learn and keep trying to help.
Right. Right.
So.
And that's all we can do. You can't be an expert in something, until you're willing to be educated in it. And I listened to this last week, a really good podcast on this topic with Andrea Owen. She has a podcast, and she was interviewing a woman who had studied this a lot, even though she was also a white woman, McKenna Held, who's a chef, who, and it was a really, really great discussion. And it sort of went to that, if you think you're not affected, it would be like saying that, I'm a woman, but I'm not at all affected by, our culture's messaging around what we're supposed to look like.
Mm.
I mean, women know it. I was doing this blog the other day, and I was researching sort of all the messaging that our girls, our adolescents, and even earlier get about physically, and this is, I think, black, white, brown, all women, about what you're supposed to change to be an ideal woman. And you can literally start at the top of your head with your hair color and then go to your eyebrows. And now we can grow our eyelashes extra long. And yesterday I saw something for taking off the hair on our face.
Oh,
and then you can get bigger lips. And then, and it just went from like,
and braces.
And braces,
Yep.
and you can
Removing
wear
this.
makeup, and you can, and I just thought, like, we're a culture that has women spending most of their lives maintaining something, like on a diet, getting their hair done, getting their nails done, like doing all these things instead of, and the messaging is pervasive. If you think you've like gotten past that and you are letting your hair grow, I mean, you can't get past it without work. And I think it's the same thing. Like, this is a racist culture. And so we don't even know what messaging has come in because it's so ingrained in the way we think sometimes. Yeah. I do think it's changing. I think what's funny is, our old brain is always trying to tell us is trying to protect us. I mean, our old brain, our cerebellum that has all of our fear.
I was going to ask if you would describe old brain and what that term is.
So old brain. So I do a lot of work with people who have fear, and anxieties and stress. And, our old brain is sort of this cerebellum. It's the place where our hunger comes up and our fight or flight response and all these like automatic reactions to keep us safe, which is totally different than our frontal cortex. And that's where all of the things that make us different from animals, our ability to plan and organize and come up with higher level functioning and all of that. And we can get in a place where we live from this old brain place of fear. So here's an interesting example of that, the pandemic. Okay, so we're living in this pandemic, but in America, we have this value about not being fearful, right? We're supposed to overcome our fears. The only problem is that there's a difference between a rational fear and an irrational fear. Irrational fears are like, I'm scared of the elevator. I'm scared of spiders. Now, maybe if you live in Costa Rica or somewhere, you should be scared of spiders. They're really big there. But but overall, it's irrational fears. And the virus is a rational fear. But there are a lot of people out there behaving in a way to say, like, I've looked at the stats. I'm this age group. I don't have a condition. Like, I don't need to worry. I'm out there. I'm not going to live in fear. And it's so much more complicated and so much trickier. But that old brain basically is where we make these quick judgments, quick responses, and that is a place where I think a lot of our problems. I got way off course. I can't even.
Oh my goodness, not at all. So you were talking about how the old brain comes into play, and how I think you were going to get into like the judgment aspect of that and how we can maybe sort of sidestep that or overcome it.
Yes, exactly. So what I was trying to say, and I recently did my own podcast. It was really funny, but it was just called like Judgment versus Empathy and How Dolly Parton Could Save the World.
Can I just say, I'm so glad I literally have that in my notes for later because this was one of my favorite episodes of your podcast. So anyway, yes.
So it was funny that these two things sort of came together for me. So one of the things, like when you asked me at the very beginning, like, how am I doing? So one of the things I was noticing as we got into this pandemic time, and now even more with all the stuff happening with racism, but I was getting very, old brain is like, we judge, and we have to make these quick, like, did I hear a sound? Is there a tiger in the tree right there? Like, do I need to get down and hide? And so I think we have this as a predisposition just from being human to judge. But now that we live indoors in houses and we get food at grocery stores, it doesn't really serve us like it used to. And so, but it's still it's like automatic negative thoughts. They happen, but our frontal lobe should help us overcome those. So we control them, they don't control us. And so I was noticing that I was very judgmental, especially about people who don't wear masks. And it comes, I shouldn't even have to explain it, but I will. But it comes from, like, I have a father who's almost 80. He's got stage 4 cancer. I bring him groceries every week. One of my very best friends has a daughter with Lyme disease and asthma. And so even though I want to feel as normal as possible, I really do wear my mask to help other people. And I would very much appreciate it if other people wore masks to protect me. And so I was out one day running and nobody had on a mask. And it was earlier before we kind of had the outdoors, it's pretty safe. And so it was more like there's all these asymptomatic people running around infecting us, and people were getting very close to me. I was very, very angry, and I was judging. And I got home that day, and what I like to do with anger is I like to say, okay, anger is an emotion that gives us information. Okay, so what's the information? The information is that I didn't feel safe. And I was judging everybody. How, what is wrong with you people? You're so selfish. You're so, like, how can you not care about other, blah, blah, blah. And I got home and I just went, you know what? That was like 100% on me. It was 100% on me because I know that trail is packed. I know that people down here don't wear masks. And yet I went out and compromised my value system, which is to wear a mask and be around people who wear masks.
Yep.
And not get exposed. And I put myself in a situation that wasn't going to happen. And I was just like, how many times do you have to go back to, like, square one with things? So that kind of started the idea for the podcast. But then even further, I was in a store, and you've heard this story then, where I saw a woman without a mask, and I immediately was, and she had a baby, and I was like, oh my God,
yes,
who
I'm
isn't
so
wearing a
glad
mask?
Yep.
Was in front of a baby, and the baby was probably between 10 months and a year. And so she's walking around and I'm kind of shopping behind her, and we're going down an aisle, and this couple, or this man, and I think his wife was kind of behind him, and they looked to be old. I mean, they were in their 80s, with their masks on, are coming up the aisle. And I just started to shake my head like, see, lady, like, there are old people. And she grabbed her mask and put it on her face very quickly. And the second she put it on her face, her baby started crying. And her baby started fussing and, like, reaching for her face, and he was trying to get it off her face. And I was getting closer because she had stopped to put the mask on. So by now I'm pretty close. And there's, like, a tear starting to, like, form in her eye, because she's like, what do? I have to get groceries for my family. There's old people right here. I want to wear a mask. My kid is distressed. And I just had this aha moment, like, my God, I just, like, turned her into this self-centered monster, and here she is just trying not to distress her baby.
Yeah. It makes me think, I bet a lot of people listening are in a very similar situation, because a lot of our listeners are people with very young children, or they're having kids who are a little older and a little still with the same instinct of, like, I hate that mask, but with more ability to reach and grab or her, express their discomfort or their fears with like yelling or crying or something like that. And it is so hard. I mean, it's so, I'm really glad you brought that whole thing up, because if I remember correctly, there was my two favorite podcasts of yours that I've heard so far are the one about Dolly Parton, which is the one where you tell the story of this baby and the mom. And then the other one was, you share about going for a run, and how your sort of judgmental feelings and your anger cut your run, like, short by miles. Like you physically couldn't run as far.
Right. And that's the thing about Dolly Parton. It wasn't so much that the whole point of both of those was like, if people could see it as self-serving to get rid of anger and judgment and have empathy, because yeah, like when I was in that angry space, like it sapped my energy. I was done. I was going out that day for probably a 7-8 mile run. And I got to mile 3 and I was done. I like had to turn around and get home. Whereas I know everybody can relate to that day. You're feeling so good, you know, something good is happening. It's spring, it's Friday, you're going to see friends and you're just so energized. You know, it's that spring fever feeling of and you know, Dolly Parton does not engage in judgment. I mean, now I could have this, given the 9-part, 8-part podcast series, Dolly Parton's America, that's all I've listened to. I'm not good friends with Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
But
that's
every
time, I went down that rabbit hole too.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it. So yeah.
Yeah. It's so, you know, but what she doesn't do is sit in anger and judgment. She just doesn't. She just goes, oh, well, we should pray for that person if they're lost. And then she moves on. And what it can create is this positive, creative energy, this space where maybe you just go, I don't know why that person isn't wearing a mask. I'm going to keep mine on. I'm going to stay away. But then you don't get into the negativity and it doesn't take you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I feel like I was recently hearing that. I can't remember if it may have even been you, Shannon. That the idea that like that hurts us.
Yes,
like,
that
person will never know that I was feeling judgmental of them, but boy, I know it and it hurts me.
Yeah, there's actually research on that. So they did research on gossip.
Mm-hmm.
And when people speak poorly about somebody else, it has a negative effect on their system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you just think about that, that's really funny because we think it's kind of like, oh, I'm bonding with this person. It's kind of fun. It's actually not good. But when they studied people gossiping in a positive way, so we're talking about our friend who's not in the room, but we're saying like how amazing she is, that didn't have the negative effect. And I just thought that was fascinating. It's like down to our cells. Our bodies know if we're sitting in negativity, or we all know when we're stressed, like cortisol comes up, we don't sleep as well, we eat more, all of these things. So we're all trying to manage our stress, right? Well, managing your thinking is a whole different topic that's probably even more important.
Yeah. I want to ask, I would love to talk about your past a little bit, because I think that it's really relevant to what we're talking about now. And I really, I think about like I feel like have come by this information very honestly, right? About
Yes.
judgment and about like, these are great tools to help anyone through this pandemic, but you've learned them before the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about how?
I'm trying to think of how do I give like the Cliff Notes version of my decade ago. So I was a person who bought every lie. Like if you're skinny, you'll be happy. If you're rich, you'll be happy. If you have 2 kids and you don't have to work, you'll be whatever, like whatever your personal set. I bought all of the incorrect if-thens. And I ended up marrying a wonderful man. I don't want to say anything bad about the father of my children, but I knew he had addiction in his history. And so when I had 2 kids, I think they were about 8 and 11 at the time, maybe 7 and 10, he relapsed for the umpteenth time. And I finally decided that I couldn't do it anymore. Living with an addict, as so many thousands and thousands of people have done, is very difficult. So I basically, and it had come at a time when he had a very big relapse where he lost his medical license. And I mean, I just went from this one world one day where I had like a beautiful house in Denver and a house in the mountains for skiing, and I was mostly stay-at-home mom. I kind of worked for a hobby, a couple weeks, couple hours, to use my brain a little, and vacationed all over, and like the next day, was selling everything, found out there was no money. He was going off to 4 months of $1,000 a day rehab.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
I mean, it was absolutely insane. And so I got to this little rental house after having lived in this $1 zillion mansion. And I was sitting there just thinking, like, how do I not do this again? Like, the pain I've caused my children, it was really more about them, although that's dumb. Now I should have made it just as much about me. But it was sort of like, where did I go wrong? Like, I started on a good path with two good parents, and I, like, where did I get so off track that I wasn't happy as a stay-at-home mom? I didn't like spending my free hours thinking about, the next diet or the next who I was just going to go to lunch with. And so I really started to dig into the research on happiness, like what really makes us happy. And I came up with these 4 areas. And then I had this brilliant editor. I used to actually, when I was doing my work with clients, I'd call it SAPE, social accomplishment, pleasure, exercise. And my editor, when I started writing, was like, why don't we call this PACE? It sounds better.
It's so
She's
good.
like, Shannon, SAPE isn't a word. I was like, you're right. So it stands for pleasure, because we are all human beings wired for pleasure. I mean, literally, we just have to think of our childhood, which you spend your life studying. I mean, kids roll down hills, and they paint, and they color, and they laugh, and they,
as we talk about in the intro and outro, they pee in the woods, they climb trees, like, right?
Totally.
They drink from the hose.
And I think it was actually a moment when I was at a jumping castle, watching my children jump, standing with all the parents, like looking at their phones, doing nothing. And this wonderful dad came over to me and he goes, don't stand here, go jump. It's so effing fun. And I was like, and I went out and jumped for like 2 hours. I was sore the next day. I realized they're exercising all day and they don't even know it. They don't have to like, oh, I don't want to do it. So it's pleasure, accomplishment, which people in our culture have either too much or too little of, connection, and exercise. And I have found that if I'm in a bad place, I'm irritable, I'm grouchy, I just have to go through that and go, what aren't you doing? And it's often for me, because I tend to live in accomplishment too much, I haven't spent time with my girlfriends. So I have to then, make an effort, put stuff on the calendar, and that pace is really tough during pandemic, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have started. So, I was going to share about this at the end, but I think now it feels appropriate. So Shannon, if you go to shannonconnery.com, which you can find the links right in the show notes, it's Connery. You can sign up for Shannon's email list, and what you get is a free gift, and it's a whole. It's called Analyze Your Pace. I'm looking at it right here, and it's a whole thing that will help you figure out, like, what of these areas are you strong in? What do you need help with? Like, and I'm thrilled with that. I really hope that everyone listening will go and get it.
I know, and the funny thing is, it's such an easy diagnostic tool. It's not an easy thing to fix all of, because those areas are tough.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who have to work, and so maybe their accomplishment isn't very satisfying, but it would take a long time to transition careers. And so there's a whole bunch of steps, and you have to figure out, okay, well, what do you want to do? And connection can be really hard for people if you don't have friends you like, if you want more friends, but you don't know where to meet people, like all of that. And as you know, like, exercise is hard. Exercise is really hard, especially you have like a physical complication that probably makes movement more difficult. Like, how do you figure out movement, exercise?
You know what I've been thinking about that's so interesting is you said that your sort of moment was a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So almost to the date today. We are recording this on June the 19th. We're recording it on Juneteenth, which I think is a very fun and wonderful thing to note. This is the day that slavery finished in the United States for real. It was the day that Texas became compliant with the anti-slavery laws in 1865, something like that. Which just makes my heart sing, and I love that we can celebrate that day. That is an American holiday, man. That's so cool. On June the 19th of 2011, I became unable to walk. I had the onset of a tendon disorder that at the time I did not realize was a tendon disorder. And the truth is, it's not that I became unable to walk on this day. It is that I contracted I don't want to, like, we need cliff notes, right? So I got a thing that I would not wish on my worst enemy called diverticulitis. And the problem was in my gut, and it was not addressed. And so I've since seen, a whole team of people about this, and the rheumatologist was the one who helped me figure out. This is years later. We're talking years later. I finally get to the rheumatologist who says to me, yes, absolutely, this sort of thing can happen. It's rare, but it can happen, and it can be from something like the diverticulitis. So basically, I don't know the mechanisms. I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is that after the diverticulitis, I took antibiotics, and they had a thing in them called fluoroquinolones, a name that is just embedded on my mind, right? And fluoroquinolones in these interim years have been shown to cause tendon problems and tendon ruptures and scarring and stuff like that. And some people get it, and it goes away after a little while. And some people get it, and it stays forever. And so when I become stressed or I'm overusing things, my tendons scar. And so we didn't know any of that, right? So I get diverticulitis. I go to the emergency room. I have to live a whole different way in terms of eating and stuff like that. Like, my one nutrient became fiber. That was the thing I had to really focus on the most. And, that and hydration have become the two pretty well most important aspects of my nutrition. And later that summer, after taking the fluoroquinolones, which I had to take 2 rounds. I wasn't going to do. It's so hard to do cliff notes. It's so hard. Anyway, okay. I'd seen the doctor. Doctors misunderstood this all the way along, and so I saw my primary care doctor, and they were like, "Oh, it's probably bursitis, so take Advil for a couple weeks, and then you'll be fine." Well, the last day of that Advil, we went to a place called Storyland, which is like this acres wide Disney World-like park for little kids. And the next day was the last day that I could walk. That was it. And basically what happened was I was in incredible pain. And it was really centered around one area of one leg that when I went to see the orthopedist, they were like, "Oh, that's probably a bucket tear, like a meniscus tear." And so I was given, oh my gosh, cortisone shots and all of that. By the end of that year, so that was in August that I got my first cortisone shot. By the end of that year, I couldn't walk more than a few steps. Like, in the fall, I had started looking for a wheelchair when I left the house. And I was thinking about it. It took me, the rehab from that started in February. Basically, I went to a different doctor. My parents and my husband together convinced me that there were other doctors that could help. And I hadn't believed that. I didn't want to have the hope, of going to somebody else and have those hopes dashed. But when I did, they basically said, "We can absolutely help you. And the first thing we want to do is give you aquatic physical therapy." So I had to go to a different physical therapist's office. It was very, very helpful. So in February of 2012 was when I really started my rehab. And the first thing I needed to do was strengthen my leg. Well, the first thing we needed to do was make them better. Like, the tendons, the scar tissue needed to be fixed. And then the next thing we needed to do was build the strength back up. And so the scar tissue was pretty well fixed within a month or so. And then the next year and a half was how long it took me to be able, for example, to get back up on skis. It was a full year before I could walk a mile of rehab. I'll never forget how it felt to stand up on both legs without holding on to anything. And I was in the physical therapist's office and thought I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I just remember everybody in the office cheering. I mean, it was it was like, once they had alleviated the pain and figured out what the problem was, and taken the pain away, it gave me hope, first of all. And then it was a very, very long road. So that's how it happened that I got my legs back. And then the following winter, so I had my first season of skiing. In the middle of that season, I lost my thumb tendons went.
Yeah.
And I will not get into all that. I'm still recovering from that.
But I
And I'm
love that
okay
you
about that.
skied. Yeah.
So for me, the most important stuff was the physical, like
Yeah.
being able to exercise, being able to walk, hike, just be on my feet and be moving. And
Yeah.
still to this day, that makes me feel so much better. And there have been times where there's been a reversal of that, where I've had other tendon problems that have, taken me out of the, the ability to be able to do those things. And every single time I've been able to counter them by going to this physical therapist and getting the scar tissue mitigated and which is very painful again. It's not fun. But through all that, I've realized, I think it was instrumental in my ability to feel pleasure, like I had really been in that rut of like, is this, as much as I love my family and I'm happy to be a stay-at-home parent, we're homeschooling and everything like that. There were moments where I'd be like, is this all there is? Like, is there nothing else that I can do with my life and my brain, And having the tendon disorder gave me the opportunity to use those parts of my brain to create this show that nothing else had.
I mean, the funny thing you say that, I think that when things fell apart for me, I was actually at Disneyland. And I was taking my daughter to an acting camp, and I was with my ex-husband at the time, and he sat me down, and it was about June 5th, 2011. So
Oh
how
my
funny
God.
and I feel the same way, that like, once you know that you have the power to address something that you think will take you down and it doesn't, that the strength you get from that, and the ability, the gift of reprioritizing, it is like something I would never go back and not have that horrible several years of just fear and trauma and rebuilding and just, and I ran a marathon in that. I decided to, like, I had all this extra time, or a night that he would have the kids, and what was I going to do? So I decided to train for a marathon, even though I had been judgy about women who had to run marathons. Like, why don't they get a job? I mean, I'm telling you, I had to learn from every one of these things so many times. And I found that, like, there was this weird mind-body connection, that if I had not been into exercise, if I had not decided to really make that a priority for my mental health and my physical health, I would never have known that there's this thing where you think you can't do anymore, but if you make a plan, then you can do more, and you just do more. And then one day you can run 7 miles and you can barely make it to the door. And then 3 weeks later, you're running 14 miles. And why? I mean, could it be the 1 mile, the one time you did in between? I don't know. But I found that there was this power in going, I'm going to create a value. And this is what I do even today to get through this pandemic. I do a lot of values work. Like, what is your value around happiness, or your value around health? And I created a value of healthiness, because if you just have a goal, like, I want to run a marathon, then if you get injured, you're out. But if you have this, like, a value of health, then okay, something comes up, like your horrible nerve issue, but you figured out how to get back on skis, because that's, like, important.
That was
to
what
you.
mattered.
And I just love that. I mean, people tell me all the time, I'm perfectly happy and I don't exercise. And I just say to them, I agree that you're happy now. I don't know if you know, like, how big it can be if you move your body. Like, we're supposed to move.
So I'm going to reach up and grab a picture. Actually, in reaching up, I can also show off my shirt says half full.
Oh, I just love that.
This is, how can I do that?
Yeah, I see it.
So that's me when I was probably about 20, I don't know, 25 or 23 or something like that. I'm in men's boxer shorts, because why not, right? I'm at the top of Mount Washington.
Oh my gosh.
And the reason I have got that picture up on my bulletin board is because the look on my face, and I'll just show it again, is one of exhilaration. Like, my mind is blown.
Like, I did it.
And exactly. And that, I mean, the thing next to me is the top of a gigantic pack. Like, that's my sleeping thing on top of a gigantic pack. And that was the third time that I'd climb Mount Washington. I did it first as like a 12-year-old kid. And I did it with camp, actually. And those, for me, the experience of exhilaration is such an important value. And I just love that you had, brought it up that way. And I want to try and relate this back to both of our stories, right? I want to try and relate it back to like what someone with young children who works and is stuck at home right now and is very concerned because nobody knows what's going to happen with surges and with school and with all of the things that are just coming up for us, and just keep feeling like we're being smacked in the face with them, it's so important. One of my coaching clients said it this way. She said, I need to figure out not just how to live through this. I need to figure out how to live in this. And for me, that feeling of exhilaration is that's what, and that's what my feeling of living is. And so I really try to work with people and figure out like, what does that mean to you? Like, how are you living in this? And what can we like, so for some people it's there's a kind of yoga called rage yoga. Just absolutely cracks me up. It's a yoga instructor so I was a yoga instructor before my tendon disorder. And so and if you've ever taken a yoga class, like you'll know that it's a lot about sort of connecting up body and mind and breathing and everything like that. And so what they're doing in rage yoga is they're like, exhale and drop an F-bomb as you go into down dog or something like that. Absolutely crack. And so like that is some people's exhilaration. It's some people's way of, and you still get the wonderful stretching and you get the deep breathing and all that good stuff. But I wonder if that's something that you have noticed, that, that when you're helping people, what you're doing is you're helping them find out what's most important to them so they can live right now.
Yes. No, I do think so. And I think right now, all my clients, like whatever was happening before this is on steroids now.
Yes.
So if you were having some marital issues and you were coming to see me or you were coaching with you because of your marriage and you are stuck at home all day with your spouse, homeschooling your children, like things are not easy right now. And whatever you were dealing with, if you were dealing with, not having a good financial situation, that is not good now. Like there's so much happening. And I think all the experts, like we're all making it up. And the one thing I say to my clients, which is the first time that's ever happened, like we are all in this.
We're all experiencing it together.
In this. Yeah. And I do think that there's something that's so, like just using that language, like my next door neighbor is dealing with what I am. And the person down the block and the person in China and the person in Europe so that's one thing. I have found this more than ever to be true, that we have to be good at detoxing our visual environment right now. And for me, I started doing that 2 weeks ago, and the difference it has made has been profound. And what I mean by that is that at the beginning, it was like, what's happening? And I had sort of CNN on in the background. And then I was listening to, the radio all day. And I had this, like, what's happening? And then same thing once the
marches, gotta be up on the news.
How many people have died? What's happening in New York City? Is Denver bad now? Is it like, can I look on my news app and find out how many cases were in my neighborhood? And I was doing that, and I was finding that it was making me worry. It was making my body feel tense. It was bad background. My husband and I will kind of talk back to the TV when political stuff is happening. Well, of course and so I turned off the TV for 6 days. I did not go on social media. I listened to like a French cooking podcast. I studied my French more with my, and I mean, I'm telling you, my body and then I get out in nature every single day, no matter what. And nature, I live in a city, but I mean, I get out on a trail with trees. Mm-hmm. I can see the mountains in the distance. And those three things, like changing my exercise so that it's always outdoors, and just engaging in more pleasure and turning off all that data, it will save you from being, you can get above treading water.
Yeah. It's so important to have that space and quiet. Have you ever heard of the book Digital Minimalism? by Cal Newport. Oh my gosh, this book. It's like my husband and I both feel like it's kind of saved our lives. Not our marriage. Our marriage was already really great. But in this digital age, and I would think this is especially true during the pandemic when we are all like, our whole lives are Zoom calls now, and our children's are as well.
Yes.
What this book did for me, for us, was it gave us the chance to completely have a digital detox for a month. This was in April of 2019. So we decided to do it for my birthday. Ben, on my birthday, my husband was like, fine, we're doing it today. Cause I'd been like, can we please do this for my birthday? I really want to. And that was the day where he was like, yes, I'm in, let's do it. So we took from that night to 30 days out, and we took away every non-essential technology that we had. So no Netflix, no Reddit, no, for me, it was no online. I don't read a lot of the Boston Globe online anyway, but I didn't do any of it at that point. No podcasts that were not about essential things. Like author podcasts or something is what I would think of as essential. We kept texting because our kids message us. Like, you get to decide, everybody gets to decide what is an essential technology, and to spend 30 days without them. I mean, at first we were like, what have we done? And then I remember this one night where I said, you know what, like where we would ordinarily be just sitting down for, I don't know, a couple hours of Netflix or something. Right. And I said, you want to go outside with me? And we went outside, and it was like dusk, and, you could see the stars coming out, and like there were birds settling in. And I was like, and like you could feel the breeze. And it was like, wow, I need more of this. And I stopped listening to podcasts on my walks. And what I really realized was that I didn't have so much of a visual thing. It was audio for me. Like, I had been listening to hours and umpteen hours of podcasts. Yeah. And what I learned to do, and what has still stayed with me to this day, is if I'm finding that I want to go back and if I'm like, oh, I missed what they were just saying, I'm just going to hit the back button for 15 or 30 seconds. That's when I need to shut it off, because I'm not listening. Like, that is my brain's indication. Good. Like, you just can't take this in right now. So just let yourself be quiet.
Yeah.
And highly recommend Digital Minimalism. I think it would be great reading for.
It's funny because as we're having this conversation, I was sort of just thinking, and I love that, because I think everybody's in this space. So, you had your medical, issues that changed your life, and I had this crazy situation I went through that changed mine. And I feel like we're all in that space, and everybody wants to be done and go back to how it was, mm-hmm. and we can't.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we could have this culture. I almost wonder if we would have responded as a group, as unified in we need police reform, if it wasn't for the pandemic. Because I'm telling you what, I'm normally go, go, go. I'm here, I'm there. I wouldn't even be in the country at this time of year, ever. Mm-hmm. And we're all sitting in a space of a little less and a little slower and a little bit more thought. And I just wonder if that's why some of these issues are getting addressed.
Which, wouldn't that be great if there was if it served some purpose?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the virus is kind of a genius in a certain way, and not one that I am happy for because it's created so much suffering. But like, it's highlighted a lot of stuff that's broken, really, really broken. Mm-hmm. The fact that people of color get sicker, that's a problem. We have a culture where we need to get better access to everything and it's, the meat packing industry is the one that's suffering, because we eat too much meat, and we're cutting down rainforests, and we're ruining the planet so we can all have a burger whenever we want. And it's just kind of a genius.
And when I think about what likely our listeners are going through, it highlights that, it's really brought into very bright relief the idea that, like, we can't simultaneously work for 70 hours a week and be a single parent to our 4-year-old.
Right.
If we're doing that all from home with no help, which I work very closely with people who that's their life right now. And like, how do you live in that?
And how about,
and they're doing it, they're crushing it.
It's unbelievable. People have just astonish me at levels, and their creativity and figuring it out all out. I mean, people are
Yeah.
just so amazing. But like also like the teachers, can you imagine like how much we are all just thinking, I miss my kids' teachers so much, it makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
And that, let's pay these people better.
Yeah.
The doctors of our universe, they should get paid the same. One heals our minds, one raises our children for more time during the day than we do. Like,
it's
so
really,
in that respect, I think that it has the option to be a real turning point for a lot of us in making some different decisions, which I think is probably a good thing.
And I think this is a really good point to kind of go out on. So what we've really spent our time kind of talking about today is like, when we're feeling judgmental, which can totally like I do that too. You know what I mean? Whether it's to myself or whether I'm yelling at my kids or whether I'm, ranting at something that feels very unjust or makes me angry, or I'm deciding on what somebody else, else's motivations are, that kind of thing. Like that can happen to me. Right. But like, so to be able to say like, wait a minute, why? Like there's something wrong if that's happening. Like, how can I address that so that I can come back to a more positive place? So we've got, that is one, I think, super important, basically crucial idea for anybody listening or watching. And then if we can kind of expand outward a little bit and we can think like, we're all in a place right now where we have to focus on that. We don't have a choice. Right. And so that means if we can be feeling better within ourselves, if we can be creating an environment in our homes that is more positive because we're living in this, not just trying to get through it, with whatever means there are, if we're instead trying to be introspective and everything like that, can we bring some justice for people who have needed it for hundreds of years? Like, can we expand that outward so that we're really taking this moment and we are making it be where we'll look back 100 years from now, and people will look back 100 years from now and go, you know what, this was the moment. This was where it happened that people got justice in their homes, with their kids,
right.
and in the wider world,
No, I think that's good. I mean, all the thought about empathy and really trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes, whether it's for poverty or different color of your skin, or like me with the woman in the store with the mask, and I realize as we're talking, like, I can't rant at the TV anymore. I can't tell my kids, you've got to come with this open heart and have empathy and try to understand someone else's position, and then sit there in judgment. So as we all learn, I mean,
and I think the one last thing that I think about is in the inevitable times when we do, for me, it's not so much ranting at the television, it's getting to the bottom of a jar of Nutella, right? Like it's the stress eating, it's the sort of the self-harm in that way, because I'm just so stressed out and I can't take it anymore. For the most part, I've gotten away from that, but the pandemic has produced moments where, where that's been a go-to thing. And so to be able to forgive ourselves when we do that, I think that's so important. Yes. We can't always be perfect. And
no, and I like when I do, it's funny that you say that. I love that, because when I do values work with people, I say, come up with your value and then, try to do it 80% of the time. Because it's true. Like, you throw a pandemic at people and we're eating comfort food.
Yeah.
We're all having, a couple more cocktails during the week because we're tired. We're exhausted. We want to be a little numb. Yeah. And you have to have grace with yourself about that. This is hard. This is so hard.
It is. It's really hard. And it's really good that we have people like you, Shannon Connery, to help us through it.
Well, I really appreciate, I mean, I think I do this for the same reason you do. When I was going through all my trauma, I honestly, even though I have a PhD, I couldn't afford therapy. Mm-hmm. I couldn't afford therapy. I was going through a divorce. I was going through trauma. I was stressed. I couldn't afford therapy. And so when I got into a much better situation, I just thought, I could give people most of the things I use in therapy in podcasts. Like, how do you work on forgiveness? How do you work on anger? And so that's kind of what I did. And I love that you are helping this stressed out world of parenting, which I think has incredible expectations around it now, to just, here's tools, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
love that.
thank you. Thank you. You know, same for you. I love what you're doing. I think it's crucial. It's very important.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to say thank you so much, Shannon Connery, for coming on our show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope somebody out there listening is helped in some way by what we talked about.
Yep. Yep. I think so. I really hope so as well. And I think that can happen. You can find Shannon at her website, which again is shannonconnery.com. And you should, because you want the PACE, questionnaire, the PACE, like the thing that will help you figure out your pleasure, accomplishment, connection, and exercise like needs. So again, shannonconnery.com, you can go there. You can find me at weturnedoutokay.com. And I've got lots of free resources over there for you, as well as more information about my parenting books and my private coaching community. And I always like to finish up with a super special thanks to our producer. He is the man who not only produces our show, but he is the father of my kiddos. He is my husband of many years now. In fact, he is officially the 23-time winner of the Husband of the Year award. Our anniversary was very recently. And his name is Benjamin Culp. So thank you, Ben, so much for all that you do for us. And finally, thanks again to you so much for listening and for watching, and we will see you next time.